All right, welcome everyone. I've got actually one of my favorite people in TA, and it may not even be in TA anymore, but Mandy Schaniel. And normally I ask people to tell me a little bit about themselves, but we're going to do something a little different this time because I think Mandy, you and I have known each other since five,
Yeah.
six, something like that. All right. So
Uh,
this is how we met, and I'll give a little intro. And correct me because this is now a long time ago, but Mandy started working with me at Go Jobs back in 2006 as part-time while she was finishing up her college degree. Then she came and worked with me at Go Jobs full-time for probably about another year and a half or something like that. Then moved on to other companies in the recruitment marketing space, and then landed this killer job at ZipRecruiter. And it wasn't really killer in the sense like a big advancement because Mandy already knew all this stuff. She was hired by Ian and the startup team at ZipRecruiter back in what was probably 2010, 2009, 2010.
2012.
Well, okay.
Yep.
And what were you were employee 19, I think, or something like that?
19.
Yep. And built the customer service or the inside sales team, depending on how you want to call them, early on at ZipRecruiter. She's had a heck of a career in the recruiting space, and she's written a fantastic book that we'll put all the info in. But I think Mandy has been one of my biggest success stories as a founder and a business person because, and hopefully, Mandy, you tell a story about just working with someone who is willing to just absorb everything with an intention of executing. And so that's who Mandy is. And Mandy, give me a little spiel otherwise on what you think.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And I do tell stories of our time together, and I laugh. I reference the myriad of titles I had in that relatively short span of time at GoJob. It was a wonderful experience. I think we still laugh thinking about my training when you brain dumped the entire industry, everything I needed to know on the whiteboard for, I think, 2 weeks straight, 8 hours a day. It was fantastic. I'd never had a leader who saw my thirst for knowledge and my need to just understand all of the inner workings before just take the time like that to say, okay, you want to learn? Here's everything in my head that I can get out so you can help in any way possible. It was really a great lesson in leadership that didn't quite hit me until later in my career when I became a leader. And I realized, okay, there were set, how I was incredibly motivated and I had no hesitation whatsoever of walking into your office and handing you a sheet of paper that said, by the way, this is what I've been doing. This is a job title for that. And this is how much I should be getting.
Yep. Yep.
And I look back and for a little while I was like, ooh, Mandy. But it was one of those relationships that felt comfortable. I could share those things. We would have a conversation. And if it made sense, you were like, yeah, you're right. Like you're learning, you're growing, you're going above and beyond what I asked you to do in this role. So yeah, that makes sense. And it didn't always make sense. So that was a huge learning lesson that came in handy years later when I had my first executive role and was responsible for other people because I'd worked at other startups where it was really just me or someone I had a dotted line to me part-time. It doesn't give you the same experience. I wrote the book partly because I think it's important for the people that helped me to get to where I've gotten to in life and in my career to get some acknowledgement, but also it's important to share those stories of when I felt like I had no idea what I was doing and how did I get past that? How did someone help me? How did I get past it in my mind? What are the little hacks? And it's really nothing all that complicated, but understanding little things about how your brain works and mindset can make the difference between really being stuck in your brain and feeling like you can't move past some boundary and really unleashing success in everything that you do. That's when I had the chance to what I call retire from full-time work and focus on my consulting business, I really wanted to find a way to, how do I keep leading and mentoring, but still have the time to focus on my family, which is my number one priority, but one-to-many approach. And I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I was like, this is what we're going to do.
Awesome. And so that brings us back to what you and I decided we were going to talk about a while back.
Yeah.
And that is leadership. It's about working with employees, your employees, if they're contractors, they're direct employees, they're people you mentor, as well as being an employee. Some of the things that we've talked about and we'll talk about now are situations where you have imposter syndrome. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how it may be to you as an individual, how it might show up as a leader when you're having one-on-ones, and how best to do one-on-ones with employees from my experience and your experience. Because I don't think enough people talk about this. And I think if we talk about, everyone says our employees are the number one asset, why aren't we actually training our managers to bring those people up? And instead of spending more time on compliance videos that were built in the 60s, why aren't we actually spending more time to figure out how to retain and grow our workforce?
100%. I think someone out there, I haven't found the words yet. Someone out there needs to rebrand soft skills, because inherently in the name, it sounds soft, right? Like, it doesn't sound as important as it is. And that's been my experience, is that those quote unquote soft skills of really getting to know your employees and caring and putting the people first. And so many of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about when it comes to one-on-ones, they're so much more important to not only the people aspect of leadership and working and having these relationships with other people, that's what they are, but it makes such a difference in the performance and the success of the business. Like, it, in my mind, like, I've seen it time and time again. I'm like, is everyone else blind to this? It makes just so much sense to invest the little bit of human energy that it takes to build those relationships and find that connection and care about the people that you're leading. I don't know why everyone's not doing it.
So let's dive right into your part of your book. And I know you talk about from imposter syndrome. Why don't you define it in your terms, and then what it means to you for what you've seen from employees, and maybe how you've helped that, and maybe your own personal experiences. And I'll dive into on some things I think people in the industry who are probably going to watch this are probably going to go, that's totally different. What John was describing is not the John that I know.
Yeah. That, and I know we talked about this offline. I think that is the case most of the time. Unless you've been there and realized you've had imposter syndrome, most people aren't going to recognize it on your face because it's an internal battle. And it really, to me, in my experience, it comes down to a lack of confidence, abundance of self-doubt, and a whole lot of comparisons that are wildly unfair. And so for me, when I got recruited to ZipRecruiter, had my first VP title, and was responsible for building the first account management team there, and I was doing a great job. We were breaking milestones and hitting goals and all this. I had a number nickname for the amount of money that myself and my team had brought in. I was celebrated in what I was doing, which was amazing. It was phenomenal experience. But as we grew, we were bringing on more and more heavy hitters, adding to the executive team. And I'm looking at all of these people that have MBAs, and they have this laundry list of executive experience. And suddenly I'm being asked to do things that I've never had to do before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone else has a playbook or a template for this, and I don't even know what I'm doing. And so it's funny because one of the biggest and most important things when it comes to imposter syndrome, first and foremost, is realizing that you have it, because I was blind to it for a while. Second is having a support system, because the number one thing, at least in my brain going through it, was don't ask for help. Don't ask for help. They're going to realize you don't know what you're doing, right? And so, of course, I would talk to my husband and I would be upset or frustrated or stressed and working all hours of the night. And he's, babe, if anybody can figure something out that they've never done before, it's you. And I was like, you say that, you're my husband. And sure enough, one of those things sounds embarrassing now, but I'm an open book. I'll share it. It was a hiring plan. And I always did things off of gut, and my gut was pretty darn accurate. So like I didn't need anything more. So I started building it out and I was like, okay, how am I going to model this out? What makes sense? And I finally asked a colleague for, hey, can you just take a look at this? Am I like way off course here? And he's like, no, that's absolutely perfect. That looks fantastic. And I was like, oh, I can do this. I can figure those things out. And you know what? He didn't turn around and look at me and say, what a dumbass. Like she didn't know what she was doing. Oh, I'm going to go call the CEO and let them know she shouldn't be in this role. That's none of those things happened. I got
Yeah,
some
I think it's sometimes it's that
validation.
I
Yeah.
think it's that fear inside us has way more power. We give it more power than we obviously we should. And I'll give you an example of mine too. So we had mentioned this, but so I've been in the recruiting marketing space on the internet since '96. Built a company, Go Jobs, back when people were on dial-up. They didn't even have email back at
Mhm.
the time. It was, I think, and I don't know for sure, the seventh job board on the internet. And still, even up till March of last year, I had this like little gut feeling like a little boy saying I'm not good enough. People are going to find out that I don't know what I'm talking about. That, and I would see people on stage at conferences and in webinars, and I'd be like, they don't know what they're talking about. They really they're clueless, but they've got the microphone.
Mhm.
So I'm like, this, I got to figure out what this is. Why do I feel like I'm stuck and I'm like an imposter in this whole thing when the reality is I have 28 years of experience building 3 different companies, very successful companies in the HR tech space. I built the software that AppCast was built on. I built the job distribution platform solutions that most every applicant tracking system used today. But I would never acknowledge that. And then one day I did, and I talked to somebody, a successful owner who sold a company in our space as well. And he's like, John, you have learned and forgot more than most people in this industry. Just do one thing, pick up the microphone. And so that's why I started the series of find the people who have the knowledge to get it out there and get just I have knowledge too. I'll be able to share mine at the same time, but get the voices out there because I think that the HR practitioners and recruiters who don't get to go to conferences don't get the knowledge that we've got, but they just don't get to see it. And I'm really into the practical stuff, like how do we help them do their job every day? And that's why I
Right.
wanted to talk to you about this, about imposter syndrome, because it could be your leaders who have it. It could be your employees. It could be you. And sometimes it just helps if you can recognize it, you could recognize it in your employees too.
Absolutely. And you hit on a very key word that led to how I titled my book is that fear component. And fear is such a slippery little snake and so dangerous if we don't recognize that's where we're operating from. Because a lot of it, and again, these are things a lot of people think are fluffy, but they're so important. A lot of it comes to down to your self-talk. So like we both just shared in your mind those thoughts of I'm not good enough, or people are going to think I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm going to be discredited, or whatever the case may be. really paying attention to those thoughts is the first step,
Yep.
and learning how to flip them to catch up, because it's overwhelming when you first start paying attention to those thoughts, because we think a lot of things all day long. We live in a busy world. Our work environments are go meeting, do the production, right? And a lot of time people forget that thought work is incredibly productive. And your brain simply can't process unless you take the time to slow down and sort through your thoughts, let things sink in, process, etc. And it's so incredibly important to your inner health and your inner dialogue to recognize those thoughts and to learn how to flip them on their heads, because that was really big element for me. And I'm so grateful I had a leader at the time who gifted all of his executives with some books over the holiday season. One of them was Lean In.
Mhm.
And when I finally got around to reading it, because my older two, we didn't even have the third yet. They were little still. So reading a physical book just didn't happen that often. It was crazy. I finally read it and I like ran into his office. I didn't even knock. And I like slammed my hand on his desk and I was like, oh my God, it's not just me. And he's, you finally read it. And I was like, yep. And that, like that moment and that recognition where he knew he got it, he'd been there before too, really that lit a fire under me to make sure nobody passed in and out of my office or my team or anybody that I interacted with without me trying to put the spidey senses out there and empower them to share with me if they were going through that. And part of it meant sharing that I'd been through it,
Yep.
because a lot of
It's
times,
like they need a bridge.
yes, and need to understand that just because you have this title doesn't mean everything's perfect and rosy and you know exactly what you're doing and you never doubt yourself and you've never, no, but I'm not.
Yeah, and other people, and there are people who, are gonna have the persona of, I wouldn't say the bully, but they supposedly have everything figured out. They don't.
No.
Never do. They've got their own demons they're playing with too. And this, I want to parlay into the next part that we want to talk about, which is one-on-ones. How to do them, what your best practices. I've got some, what I've seen work and what I've seen absolutely doesn't work, which is probably 90% of them, which is also why people don't do them.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, and I have to share that I learned a lot about one-on-ones and the importance of them from a colleague, Kevin Gaither, call him the godfather of sales. He actually has a book out also called It Happened on the Sales Floor. Lots of entertaining stories of inside sales and growing a massive inside sales team. But he really showed me the significance of one-on-ones, because there was a time where I was like, do we really need to meet every week? But I doubted it at first. But I really did learn, if you set them up correctly, this is not a time, it's not a micromanagement meeting. It really is a time to connect with your employees. First half of the meeting should be their time.
Mhm.
Their time to ask you questions, to get advice, to fill you in on anything big or important, all of the above. And then the second half is your time. Is there anything you need an update on, anything that needs to be addressed or what have you? And then the last 5 minutes, save for action items. So nothing slips under the rug and gets forgotten about. But I found that structure works incredibly well, making sure like they don't, this is their meeting.
Yep.
What do you need from me?
100%. Now, I will further yours and make 4 specific questions that the
Yeah.
employee should be prepared for at every meeting, every one-on-one, as well as the manager. And it comes from this. I think every employee, every person, whether you're a boss or not, has these questions. But ultimately, the boss, they're responsible to themselves, so they get to have the conversation with themselves or a consultant, because they can't do it with a board either. Is, what do you want me to do? Number one. Number two, how am I doing at meeting the goal and being specific about that? Number three is, how does this fit into my career? That's the question. These are the questions everyone's asking themselves all day long at some point or another. And they don't come up every single day, that same one, but this is what people want to know so they can figure out. I should say, not everyone wants to know these questions, because if they just want a job so they can survive, they're not asking these questions. But I'd also ask them, maybe you should be asking them, because that's why they're not getting motivated. Because
Yeah. I'll jump in on that. I always recommend, so with clients or anyone that comes to me that I mentor that's in a leadership position, if they're not currently structuring their one-on-ones in one of the ways that we've talked about, just start with a reset. It's always healthy to do if you feel like, oh, I've not been hitting the mark and we could be getting more of this. Just say it. 90% of things that we want to do in a leadership capacity are so easily solved by just communicating openly. And one of the main things to do in a reset or first one-on-one is really talk about goals. For me, I learned this lesson firsthand and just how powerful all of this stuff I'm about to share is. I inherited a reactive customer service team when I was at Zip. It was challenged with transitioning them to become a proactive customer success team. And at the same time, move that very large team from a cost center to a profit center. That was my challenge. Can you do it? And we did. But the first thing, I didn't hire any of these people. So I sat down and I went through their work experience with them. I wanted to understand who they are, why they came here, what their background is. What do you love about this job? What do you not love about this job? What are your goals, personal and professional? I say this till I'm blue in the face to anybody that asks, because we all get a little bit scared to ask personal questions, right, from an HR perspective. But it's so important to understand what drives this person, what's important in their life right now, what matters to them, because you will find ways to connect the dots. And as a human being, having a leader who cares that I achieve my personal goals and I feel good in what I'm doing at work makes all the
and
difference.
support you and just even ask you about them. You don't
Yeah,
have to do much more of just be curious. And then they get you, and then they'll remember, Mandy's on my team.
exactly. And I found through that process, I don't have a count, but so many people who we were in such a unicorn position, right? We had a lot of brand recognition. A lot of people were willing to take a step down in their career just to become part of ZipRecruiter. So there were a lot of people that were in customer service roles that had so much other experience in other areas. I was able to help point them in the right direction and tell them, like, look, like, you're doing a great job, but by no means is my intention to keep you in this role. If you can add more value in another place in the organization, like, that's a win for both of us. And we made it happen time and time again. And it's funny to me because they would always be so grateful to me. And I'm like, I did nothing but ask. And I did
Mhm.
nothing but say, heck yeah, your work is done. Go shadow that other department. Like, I'm all for it. It helps the organization and it helps you, and that makes me feel good. But I didn't do anything. You did all the work. I just asked the question. But that's all it takes. That's all it takes, right? It's like you said, be curious, be supportive, and offer guidance. Really what it comes down to.
Yep. And my fourth question on that one too is, what other questions do they have for me?
Yep.
The boss. It's again, the real quick recap is: number one, what do you want me to do? Number two, how am I doing it? Number three, how does this fit into my career? And number four, what questions do you have? I think it's very similar, but you can just write those four things down. We would, in my some of the best one-on-ones I've ever had, not that I've actually worked for people very often, but when I have, the best one-on-ones, we would take out a mutual Word doc or Google Sheet or something, and we say, okay, this is what we're getting done. This is what we're going to do this week. This is the questions we had. This is what we answered. And then we would forward it on. It was just structured. And by that, I knew exactly where my boss was, what he wanted, when, all that. So I didn't have to think about what do they want me to do. And we had the structure in place, so I knew where I was as far as achieving them. And you don't have, some people say, hey, do it every week. It depends on level of seniority, I would gather. And at least once a month, you got to spend that half hour with every employee that you direct a report, I think.
Absolutely. I think weeklies are great, but there's a different cadence to some of these questions, right? In terms of goals and things like that, at least monthly, I would always encourage my teams to really think through what are your goals for the next quarter, for the next 2 quarters, for the next year. Let's keep an eye on that. And not everyone's going to have an answer to that question right away
Yep.
because a lot of people aren't used to being asked that question. And I share this in the book in the leadership chapters. You're going to have people that are like I was running into your office going, hey, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm interested in. And you're going to have people that you say, what are your goals? And they go, I don't know. Am I doing a good job? And that's what I was focused on, right? And you have to be patient, right?
I
Because
also say that there are going to be people who you ask them about their goals, and in sales, they may be the person that crushes stuff, be the best salesman, but they don't have any personal goals, or they don't. It's weird. Like they're maybe off a little bit, like in their personal life versus business life, and they're trying to achieve something for some reason.
this is why it's so important to really get to know them on a human level, because I've noticed that depending on life event, that range of growth ambition will teeter-totter in accordance with life events, right? Upcoming big life events, some people are going to go really high on the growth ambition scale. Just had a major life event, there are probably a lot of times people are going to slow down on that growth ambition scale because they need some stability, they need to process. So that's why you have to have these conversations. The only thing I would change in your 4 questions is on that third one to ask, how does this relate to my career? And how does what I'm doing tie into the company's
Yep.
mission, vision, and values? Because that is on all of the employee engagement surveys over the last, I think, 4 or 5, probably longer years. That's the number one thing that matters to employees today, that in terms of employee engagement, employee satisfaction, employee retention, is feeling connected to the organization's vision, their goals, and having confidence in their leader. And it, again, all of the things we're talking about really help to build that relationship and confidence between the employee and the leader.
And I also think it's one of the biggest thing you hear everyone talking about, and at Sherm and at anything in recruiting, is the big word called retention. And the only way to, when I'm in the business now of messaging and communications within workforces. And the funniest thing to me is that as companies, we look at like HR or departments within companies, and we know that when the United States, most people leave because of their manager. But we also know that HR really only talks to an employee in most cases when they're in trouble,
Yep.
or at least I'm not gonna, that's not always true. So don't, what I'm suggesting is that the conversation that people says, hey, you have to talk to somebody at HR, it's either because something's wrong, maybe performance, maybe your benefits. There could be any number of things, but the only time like the hourly workforce is being communicated with is by their boss or their manager, who may not be trained and or trained well. The company, the employee is a company employee, not a manager's employee. And
Yep.
HR and management really have no conversation with employees.
Yeah, I think you're right. It sets a tone when the idea of speaking with HR is scary, uncertain versus having a relationship. I think there are a lot of companies out there that are working. I love the kind of people management, people business partner, that connection, right? They're that
We had a happiness manager who that was their title. I forget what Karina's title was, something like that. something like that. Karina was great at that. Worked for HR. That was her title, and she planned all the events, and she was super fun. And if you're like, hey, you had to go talk to Karina and be like, hey, that's great. Of course, we had an amazing company culture too.
Yeah.
It was all part of it.
And so much of company culture comes down to those key interactions. Do you feel supported? Let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need to feel connected and supported and seen. And we are a whole person who
Yep.
have things going on outside of work, has thoughts swimming in our heads that may not be visible or understandable or easily pinpointed by other people. And yet we have this expectation of ourselves and others to like, all right, come on, put on your work self and just be work. That's not possible. You know what I mean? There's so many
Wear
things.
your costume for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, we have to. I just think people enjoy it too because when you're authentic and you bring your whole self to everything you're doing, it gives permission to do the same. And there's a level of comfort and connectedness that comes from, oh, yeah, like you might have this title or whatever, but you're a real person. That I think makes all the difference in the world in people feeling comfortable coming to you and asking for advice and hearing you out. And also as a leader, not feeling like, oh, I have to put on these airs so people respect me. I have a lot of opinions on that mentality because respect is earned. And my vision of a leader is to serve the people that you're leading and to help them to grow in whatever way they want to grow. I think that's what's most important. But that's gone are the days of just respect. Obviously, I'm always going to enter a situation and be respectful, but there's a difference in demanding respect versus seeking to earn it, right?
Yeah. There's one other thing I want to do before we finish up, and that is talk about growth mindsets. I think it was a combination of in March of last year, my decision to just bare knuckle it and get out of the scared little boy, and just go public and speak. But there's also something else that we had talked about too, and that is how to acknowledge people for hard work rather than just success. And a growth mindset, and I've learned this stuff from Andrew Huberman's podcast, listening to the concept of people are the people who do the best work long term aren't the people who got straight A's maybe in high school and maybe were rewarded for doing great, for getting a result. And so they get these dopamine rushes for getting an A, and their parents saying, hey, great time kicking you did great kicking the soccer ball. Like everyone on the field probably kicked the soccer ball, so it's not that huge of an accomplishment. But the thing that I learned was it's not about the result. It's if you praise individuals for the hard work, they're going to get more praise internal and create internal motivation. And that's what you want ultimately for us individually, as well as the people who work with you and for you and your consultants and contractors. If they're internally motivated because they're driven by being better and
Yeah.
solving problems and figuring things out instead of driven to get top sales numbers, and sales managers are going to say, oh, you can't do that. The reality is the person who has the internal motivation and is tied to those goals is going to kill everyone long term on those goals because they have the internal motivation to do it.
I 100% agree. The way that I try to break down the difference, if you haven't read Mindset by Carol Dweck, amazing read to understand growth mindset. But I really classified the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset is in a fixed mindset, you do something, you quote unquote fail or realize, oh, that's really difficult. And you set a boundary and say, oh, I guess I can't cross that line.
Yep.
Fixed mindset, I'm going to stay in this box over here. A growth mindset has the same experience, but goes, okay, so that was hard. How do I climb over that challenge? What do I need to learn to be able to move past that next time? And so that's the very difference, right? Is not looking at necessarily the results of that one attempt or situation, but looking at, all right, what do I need to learn? How can I grow? And how can I improve myself from here? And acknowledging in the process the hard work that it takes to do that and to even think through what I need to learn. It's such a powerful, game-changing experience. I actually had it with one of my kids in school. The difference in praising the hard work versus the results completely shifted the mentality towards school, and in a very short period of time, massively changed the outcomes as well.
Yeah, it is. That's the interesting thing is it's an immediate shift.
Yeah.
Almost, I shouldn't say immediate. It's almost an immediate. Still has to be a learned process to acknowledge people, the people who are acknowledging them, to get that internal motivation. And you've got to continuously not praise for kicking a soccer ball and getting the result, but praise for that. And they'll pick it up themselves.
Yes. Not and I don't think either of us are saying in a highly goal-driven role, we're not saying, "Oh, they failed, they'll go tell them they worked so hard and good job." Like, that's not what we're saying. But you still have to stick to the rules of the game in that role and what goals do they need to hit. But at the end of the day, unless even if they're getting let go because they're not meeting goals or expectations, I think as a leader, we should be having a conversation of that happened, that's done. Where do we go from here? How do we do it differently next time? How can you learn and grow from this? And acknowledging that effort. It doesn't have to be two separate things, right? You can still, whatever, if there's discipline needed in a work environment or whatever the case may be, you can still maintain those rules and that structure that are necessary in certain roles, while at the same time acknowledging the hard work and working with someone and alongside them, supporting them in their journey of growing and learning and doing better, right?
Yep. And yeah, I think that's good. You probably had to do this, and I don't want you to speak about any individual, but you probably have to do spiffs on performance for salespeople and things like that. What are some experiences where that you can remember using a growth mindset, even if you may not even been thinking about it back in those days? But if you remember an example where you had an employee where, and again, I want you to be anonymous on this, but if you had an employee that wasn't performing, but and maybe even let them go, but you really got into understand them, and they may have decided to leave, or you may still had to let them go, but you were trying to be open and supportive without just, "Oh, fill out the spiff form for HR."
Oh, yeah. At any time I had to put someone on a PIP, which I did, the nature of the beast, it was embedded in the process. I'm here to support you, but you are responsible for doing these things, right? We've had a conversation, we've had multiple conversations about the reason why you're on this performance improvement plan. Here is all the information. Here are the goals and the things that need to happen in this time frame that you're responsible for. I am here to support you, but it's your responsibility to put the time on my calendar. That was a big one because at first that wasn't my nature. So I'm like, let's like a one-on-one, and I had some colleagues my first go around with managing a PIP, and I realized how important it was because the people who were going to take the ownership and take advantage of my support to grow and to learn
Needed
and
to have
become
needed
the
to have
issues,
that. Yeah.
they're going to take the initiative to put time on the calendar to gauge, am I going in the right direction or not? And the people who didn't were the ones that were like, I've got 30 days or however long the PIP was, and I'm searching for another job and I'm not going to change anything. And that's their prerogative, right? I think knowing that the support is there, I will do anything
So
to help you,
Yep.
but you have to take the initiative. I think that teaches a lot in the way of growth mindset, right? Obviously, when you're put on a PIP, not a great feeling for anybody, shouldn't come as a surprise. You should have already talked about the things that aren't going well in your one-on-ones. Never come as a surprise. We talked about that one TikTok video. We could do a whole other conversation on that. It's that mix of, okay, this happened. What are we going to do about it? And you have to be in the driver's seat. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about with growth mindset and imposter syndrome, and just growing and learning and understanding mindset and how to shift your mindset, how to point it in the right direction and not let fear take over, is being in that driver's seat and being willing to acknowledge the not so great and learn and figure out how to move it into something great. And it's okay to ask for help, but you have to ask. No one is going to be banging down your door. Can I please help you? Can I please help you? Because if you're not willing to do the
They've got
work,
their own stuff to deal with. Yeah.
yeah, and then if you're not willing to ask for help, they're not going to be as invested because it's not going to be as meaningful or impactful for you.
All right. So give us the name of the book and how can someone buy it on Amazon, or maybe I'll put a link on there.
Yeah. So it's called Faith Over Fear: How to Adopt a Success Mindset.
Yep.
So everything we talked about today is in the book in a lot more detail with stories, all of them anonymous, unless it's a wonderful story. And yeah, it's available on Amazon, on my website, mandyschaniel.com, and just about anywhere else that you can get books online.
All the books stop. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mandy. As usual, we're going to see a lot more of you.
Sounds good.
All
Looking
right.
forward to
Thanks
it. Thanks,
again.
John.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for spending your time here with Go Hire Talks and listening to our guests. My intention has always been to create incredible content to help you in your career in recruiting, marketing, business, and leadership. We appreciate all of the insights and feedback you provide. If you've got guests you'd like us to have on the show, please let us know. Again, thank you for all your support.